All right, welcome astrology lovers. You are watching Astrology Hub TV, and my name's Amanda Walsh. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Astrology Hub. And Astrology Hub TV is a weekly show dedicated to helping you explore your connection to the cosmos and how cultivating this connection can help you live a more empowered, fulfilling, and vibrant life. I am so excited about today's guest, Wade Caves, and I will be introducing him in just a moment. Before I do that, I wanted to let you know about a free gift that's available to you. We are coming up on the Cancer lunar cycle, and Mercury is about to go retrograde. When Mercury goes retrograde, there will be 5 planets in retrograde. And what we learned on the summer forecast is that retrograde periods are a great invitation for us all to go inward. So what we wanted to do was put together a little gift for you that you can download that gives you some insights into the key themes of the Cancer lunar cycle, some an affirmation or a mantra that you can use, and some embodiment tips to really work with the energy. It also goes through all the important transits of the Cancer lunar cycle. So check it out. It's available. The link is above this video and also in the chat. All right, so today we are talking about the ancient practice of Horary Astrology. And if you have a question ranging from the ordinary to the transformative, Horary can help light the way for you. So in today's talk with professional astrologer Wade Caves, you are going to learn why Horary Astrology can provide shockingly accurate answers, how Horary can both help you find your missing car keys and change your life, and the best steps to take when learning Horary Astrology. And Wade, I have to admit that I don't think I really realized what Horary Astrology was until about 6 or 8 months ago when Donna Woodwell was talking about how she used it to help someone find their passport in the bathroom of totally unlikely places. She's like, it's in the bathroom. It's in the bathroom. It's in the bathroom. So anyways, it shed light on the power of this practice. And so I love that real practical application, but then this angle that it can also help you transform your life. Right. Very eager to hear how that all plays together. So thank you so much for being with us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on. This is, it's been really great. I've been watching Astrology Hub as it's, been really making waves in the astrological scene. And it's been really inspiring to see the huge group of people who come together to make this kind of happen. So, the world is getting smaller and smaller. And I think it can be really difficult for, I grew up in a small town. There was no astrological group there. So this is exactly the kind of thing that would have made a huge difference in my life if it had been available at that time. So thank you for the work that you and your team are doing. I think it's really important.
I love that. Thank you so much. The community aspect of what we're building is one of the things that is the most exciting for me, because I totally agree with you. I think most people are out there, they feel alone, especially if you're into astrology. You can talk to people about astrology at a certain level, but to find a place where you can go and actually speak the language with
a bunch
of astrology lovers all over the globe, it's just really inspiring to watch. So thank you for that acknowledgement. I want to introduce you and give the audience a little bit more information about your background.
Sure.
So Wade Caves is an astrological consultant and educator specializing in horary, electional, and classical astrological technique. He was certified with honors from the Mayo School of Astrology and has expert knowledge of traditional and modern psychological methods of chart delineation. Wade's passion is in understanding the origins of astrological symbolism and finding reliable ways to put this information to practical use in consultation. He's the editor and annotator of the 300th anniversary edition of William Lilly's History of His Life and Times, and teaches for the School of Traditional Astrology. Again, Wade, it is such an honor. I love this emphasis on astrological symbolism too. I'm sure that could be a whole nother Astrology Hub TV episode.
Oh yeah, many.
Many courses and yeah, exactly. But it's really fascinating too. All right, so a question for all of you out there. Do any of you actually work with Horary Astrology right now? And if you're new to astrology, have you heard of it before? So again, like me, it was probably two or 3 years into my astrological explorations that I even heard of it, or at least it landed on me that this is something I need to pay attention to. All right, so just if you can let us know in the chat, we'd love to hear about your experience with Horary so far. All right, so Wade, let's start with a definition of Horary astrology. What is it?
Yeah, great question. Horary astrology is a tool that is, it's divination. You know, that's what that is. We're using astrological symbolism to resolve a problem. When you're first introduced to Horary astrology, as I was, you know, I started learning psychological forms of astrology, as I've said. And while I took a great deal from that, you know, I've got a Virgo moon, I've got so much in my chart that really is like, I need a practical application for a lot of these things. And I think when I found Horary, what I was really stunned by was the amount of problems that a technique like Horary can kind of step in to help resolve. Now, when you first come into Horary, it's very common for you to have, either from what you're reading or, you know, the discussions that center around something like Horary astrology. Now, we're talking about a predictive tool that it gives yes or no answers. That isn't what Horary is. You know, prediction is absolutely going to be an element of what you do as a Horary astrologer. There's no way of getting around it, because we are talking about, you know, a situation as it's developed and the path that it appears to be taking. And, you know, that in itself is a form of prediction. But what Horary is really meant to do, if it's taken to its proper depth, is to resolve a problem that for some reason feels unsolvable. And you know, when you come to Horary, it's the best time to come to Horary when you've really exhausted all of the other common sense alternatives. So this kind of rules out, you know, an earring has just fallen off, and instead of getting on my hands and knees and having a good search, you know, pull up a chart to see where it is. You know, we really need to make sure that we're coming to Horary and asking the cosmos to kind of give us a symbol and an image for the resolution of the problem that we're facing, but it needs to be a problem in the first place. So it's about the resolution of an issue. And, you know, it doesn't mean that you can't have mundane questions like, you know, whereas am I missing passport? I can guarantee you, anybody going on an international flight the next morning, that is a very pressing problem, and one that can have really severe side effects if it's not found. But what I have found is, you know, even in these simple questions of, you know, I've lost my missing wedding ring, there is deep symbolism in what it means to lose a wedding ring. I have had an example of a client who lost his keys. He was a manager at a retail store, and he'd lost his missing work keys. And, you know, this is a big deal because he'd have to pay to have them replaced. And, you know, so he asked me if I could help him locate his missing keys. And I said, sure, you know, I can do what I can to help you out. Now, as this consultation kind of, you know, unfolded, and it was really not, it was more of a conversation than a consultation. I mean, this wasn't a client by any means. I say that offhand, but the 10th house was loaded with really difficult symbolism. And what I started to pick up on is, you know, he's walking me through his steps, is that there's something about the job that's not quite right. And what he, you know, so I stopped him and I said, you know, listen, I can help you find your missing keys, but can we slow down for a second? Tell me about your work life. You know, how are things going there? At which stage he responded saying, oh yeah, you know, I really don't feel like I have any say anymore. I'm a manager, but nobody's talking to me. They don't listen to me. They don't respect me. They don't care about my opinion. So at that stage, you know, you sit back and you say, right, so you've just lost the one symbol of your authority in that building, and you're telling me that you feel like you have no authority there. So, you know, what I said is, I think that's really where we need to spend our time, but we can definitely find your keys in the interim. But what I told him was, I said, you know, if you don't resolve these issues with what's going on at work, because he hadn't talked to his boss about it or his coworkers about his frustrations, he was holding it in. And, you know, there's something that happens where the universe speaks to us on the level that it needs to get the message across. So, you know, at first it tries to talk to the message of spirit. And then if it doesn't quite land there, maybe it occurs as a thought in the mind. If it can't get there, it's going to move the emotion. And if it can't get there, it's going to come into physical manifestation. Your keys will disappear because the universe has to shock you into paying attention to what's happening around you. It's a symbol. It's a symbol for what's happening. So I was explaining this to him and saying, I'm happy to help you find your keys, but the reality is, you're going to lose them again, you know, if you don't work on any of this. Now, we ended up finding his keys and moving forward from that, but he hadn't really done any of the work. And a week later, he emailed me to say, I've lost my work keys again. And at this stage, he was finally willing to open up and have really good conversation about his work life and his development there. And it turned out what he needed was just a change of scenery. For him, it was a situation of he's worked with these same people for 10 years. He started when he was very young, and people always remembered him as that young, kind of upstart, and they didn't allow him to change and to grow. And they kept, kind of measuring him against who he was when he was 22. So what he really needed was to not necessarily change companies, to move somewhere else. And so what ended up happening was he took that advice. He moved into a bigger city, and now is working at headquarters for that same company, and has had a massive upward trajectory as a result. But it all started with the missing key. So the thing with Horary is that we're taking a moment in time when a client and an astrologer have a connection about a problem, and the astrologer then operates as a consultant and also translator for what's happening in the macrocosm. As we're taking a look at the placement of the planets, what sign is ascending, what sign is culminating on the midheaven, where's the moon, what is the astrological significance of this moment. And then from there, we're working on finding a path forward that opens up doors and possibilities for you to live your best life. And sometimes it's a very small moment, but when taken to its proper depth, as you've said, Horary really can change lives and put you on a much better path. But really, it's not about predicting or pointing a finger saying this is exactly what should be done at this moment. What Horary seeks to do is to get you back in touch with that Jiminy Cricket inside, that kind of voice inside that totally gets where the North Star is for yourself. I know this is my moral compass. I know this is the path that I should be on. But for so many years, I've been off of it, or I can't quite figure out, should I trust myself? Should I listen to myself? And so every now and again, Horary has to come in to provide that psycho-spiritual shock to align the body with the heart again and the mind, and so that is why I love Horary, because really all of astrology, I think, is captured in Horary done really well. So I hope that suffices as an answer.
That is so fascinating, and I had no idea how deep it was. That's incredible. So, okay, sorry, quick.
I'll pretend like that was my phone. That was my phone, everybody.
Okay. Okay. So I'm very sorry about that. What does the word horary actually mean? It's such an interesting word. Question. It's really hard to say. What does it mean?
Yeah, actually, if you take it back to its Latin root, it just means of the moment. And that's all it means, is that this is a moment of significance. And it's the same root for where we get like the Spanish horario, which means schedule. So and where we get hour from, hour marker. So it's the same root for this, but all Horary is, in terms of what the word is about, this is a moment of special significance. And so you can apply the word Horary not just to questions and interrogations, but also to event charts. There's no reason why you wouldn't approach an event chart with Horary technique, because this is a moment that something special or something meaningful has occurred. And at that stage, we can now enter into the astrological significance of that moment to understand the implications, whether it's far-reaching or short-reaching. Is it part of a larger cycle, part of a smaller cycle? And it does sound so trivial to say that Horary is about, of the moment. But really, a Horary chart, and for those who are listening who don't know, a client would come to me and say, here's my problem, here's my dilemma. And I would, question and make sure that I'm clear. Once I use my location, my time. So if it's 12 o'clock where I am, and I'm based in London, so if it's 12 o'clock in London, that is where I will set the chart from, and I will work for it. It doesn't matter if you sent me an email yesterday. It doesn't matter, because it's my connection to your dilemma and my engagement with the question and my decision to translate the symbols of the sky that makes that meaningful connection. Now, Horary, we talk about it as being, kind of an of the moment kind of application of astrology, but really it's a double click into the birth chart. There has never been a time that I've had a Horary chart, never, that did not zero in on some issue that was going on in the birth chart in general. Because if you think about it, if I'm telling you that we're, right now the moon's in Libra, so if I'm telling you the moon's in Libra, Jupiter's in Scorpio at this exact moment, all I'm really doing is I'm doing divination on transits, aren't I? I'm taking the transits of the moment and I'm divining, using centuries old, thousands of years old techniques. And of course, bringing them into modern parlance. There's no sense in trying to act like I'm a, 1200s so like astrologer. I'm not. I'm a contemporary astrologer that uses traditional techniques. So that's all it is an opportunity to kind of take a look at the symbolism that's currently in play, and then to allow it to speak on, what might be a very surface level, but then if the client allows you, you can go into a really nice deep place and get somewhere quite meaningful.
So you talked about your path starting with psychological approaches to astrology. Okay. And then you found horary. What was that path like for you? And it sounds like a little bit more of a complicated approach to astrology. I don't know if that's just me hearing it that way, but it seems like it might be a hard place to start. Is that true? I mean,
well, for thousands of years, if you wanted to be an astrologer, you had to start with horary.
Okay.
You didn't. It's a very modern thing to start with birth charts, actually, and it's actually, I think that the thing about starting with birth charts is why I think as a student it can feel like you've just been dropped off into the ocean. When you study modern astrology, study modern psychological astrology, there's no hierarchy, there's no beginning, there's no end. There is any thread you pull, you'll be there for 20 years if the client lets you. You'll be there for forever. And the thing with horary is it allows you to get a really sharp understanding of your astrological symbolism, and it's very focused. You get a really sharp way to apply it. Now, it is definitely an uphill battle, but once you get horary under your belt and you know how to do it well, everything else is unlocked. Medical astrology, unlocked. Electional astrology, unlocked. Natal astrology, unlocked. Mundane astrology, unlocked. You almost don't need to be really taught in any of these things because Horary Astrology allows you the depth to understand how small scale a symbol can operate. And it's so much easier to take small scale and generalize and to understand, kind of the archy and the arc that a symbol might take over the lifetime. So, it probably is a bit challenging, I think, in the modern world because there's two things vying against each other. The first is that we all start with natal astrology anyway. That is really where we begin. We want to know about where's my moon, where's my rising sign, where's my Mars, where's my Venus, where's yours? Are we going to be a good couple? It's all relationship stuff, isn't it? That's how we all start. And we want to know why we don't like our dad as much, like why our sister annoys us and why do I like this friend so much? So we start there. But to, kind of have to step back and, assess the assumptions we're walking into that with, that creates another boundary, which makes horary quite difficult. Then you've also got the other side, is that we are, for the first time in human history, we are living in a culture of immediacy. I mean, I could remember growing up and, my parents say never get in a car with strangers, but I pick up my phone now, I get on Uber, and I literally summon strangers to pick me up. We're in a totally different world where if I want it now, I can have it now. So the issue now is in understanding that horary is not meant to be a quick fix. And it is certainly not meant to be something that is about an immediate satisfying answer. It certainly provides that, but if that's your motivation, you're going to miss the boat. So that's one reason why it becomes a bit of an obstacle. But also, studying natal astrology first can make it difficult to understand just how detailed a symbol can be in the very everyday aspect of things. Now, when I first started studying astrology, I did approach it from a psychological point of view. I went to the University of Washington in Seattle, and anybody who goes to that school, we all go through a phase where we think we're going to be a doctor or a psychologist. We all go through it. Grey's Anatomy was based in Seattle, and I was going to school there when Grey's Anatomy was still quite, the thing. And so, my experience with psychology and that it really kind of did ingratiate me in toward learning astrology, understanding archetypal forms of astrology. But, what I found was that I did struggle quite a deal. And this is before I took any formal instruction, I have to say. I mean, I was studying on my own, reading books. I might take the odd class here or there, or attend a conference. But I found it really difficult, like knowing, where do I start? Where do I end? I don't even know. You've given me this chart. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't even know how to jump into this. And when I started to begin to learn and to process and understand, what I found still was that I didn't have the precision that I really believed astrology should be able to afford. And I don't mean the precision that, being able to guess somebody's career. I mean, I wanted the level of precision to be able to describe where marks, scars, moles are on the body. I want to be able to understand, why is your body this tall and not taller or shorter? Why are your eyes the color they are? Because it just felt to me that astrology should be able to provide this information if there was anything to it. But I didn't know about horary. And there was a period of time where I actually said to myself I was giving up astrology entirely. And I do think any astrologer, we've all got the story of, I'm walking away from this. We all have it, But a bit embarrassing, but this is the Astrology Hub living room, so I'll share it anyway. I was in college and I fell in love with this boy, and he was into astrology too, and I thought, oh, that's my end because I know a bit about astrology. It never went anywhere, but he found this website, Skyscript, skyscript.co.uk, and what I'm going to actually do, just for the people who are actually attending live in the chat boxes, I'll put the address there. This website,
people, we'll put it in Facebook too, because we have people on, and we have people on Facebook. So
excellent, right. Excellent. So this website was a repository for so much great astrological information, but not just modern astrological information. I mean, I was able to find, and I didn't even know astrology went back this far. I mean, to be quite honest, I was so naive, but I was able to find texts from thousands of years ago on this. It was really mind-blowing what I was able to find here. And on Skyscript, I read an article about horary astrology, and it was such a simple thing about a horary question that was asked about a scorpion that had been found, a scorpion's nest had been found in somebody's apartment, and whether or not the scorpion was still there, and that was the question of whether or not it was safe to return to the flat. Because of the concern that the scorpion and potentially its babies or family were there, and it might be a dangerous place to live. But what was really powerful was that the astrologer who delineated that chart, such a simple question, is it safe to go back or is it not safe to go back? She took this to such a psychological place about, let's talk about the image of the scorpion. Let's talk about the protective element of the scorpion deities. If you take a look back to all the scorpion gods, they were protectors. That's what they were, and they had the sting to kind of guard and defend. So I'm reading this, and she's bringing in such a rich psychological element to it as well, with such precision, and I was hooked. I was hooked from that minute. And the person who judged that chart was Deborah Holding. And I didn't know who she was. I had no idea. Is she somebody? Is she just, some girl on a bus who's just written this article and it got published? I have no idea. But I found she was leading a course on horary astrology, and I really knew nothing more about it than what I found on her website. But I saved up for 8 months. It was, some days it would be, I'd save $1. I mean, it was $1, Amanda. It's like every nickel, penny, anything I had, I put it in a jar. And about 8 months later, I had enough to enroll in a course to take it in London. So it bought me my flight to London, my lodging while I was in London, and paid for the course. But I put work into it. I invested in this in this learning. And that course changed my life. I was absolutely mind blown. Could not have been, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I was just so excited about all of it. It was feeding my soul. And after that, I moved on to a one-on-one mentorship program with Deborah. I think she kind of could see that I was very interested. So she brought me on board there. And then about 2 years later, I started teaching for the School of Traditional Astrology, which she was the head of. Now, then I found out how big of a deal Deborah really was. I mean, she's just won at UAC. She just won the Regulus Award for Theory and Understanding. And the other people nominated in that category, absolutely, brilliant individuals. And so it was a real honor, to study under somebody like Deborah. And now she's a very close friend. So that's kind of the transition that I took. I took a long time in getting there, didn't I? But
It's perfect. It's perfect. So Wade, you keep talking about astrological symbolism.
Yeah.
The importance of understanding astrological symbolism. And you just went through Scorpio.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's what you mean by it. So can you give a few other examples of astrological symbols that, that you work with?
Perfect examples. I mean, we could definitely talk about the signs. Those are really easy ones. I mean, Mars is always a great example. I love Mars because there's nothing nuanced about Mars. He's just right in your face. There is nuance, of course, but he doesn't hold any secrets. You know, Mars reflects back a red light to us, from the Earth. So we get kind of this imagery of blood, war, energy, drive, initiative. But Mars also has a very unusual orbit. So it's very common, for instance, you will very often find, it's more common to find Mars in Leo than it would be, in Mars in Aquarius, because of the speed at which Mars moves through these signs. Now, the conjunctions to the sun, rather, in Leo. Now, with Mars, with Jupiter and Saturn, they turn retrograde or move direct on the trine of the sun. So we've got right now, for instance, Jupiter in Scorpio, and the sun's just entered Cancer. Because that's a trine, we know that Jupiter is about to either station retrograde or direct, because it always happens right on the trine. And Jupiter is actually retrograde now, which means that it will station direct and begin moving direct again. Now, that's the same thing with Saturn. Saturn also does the retrogradation on the trine or stationing direct on the trine. Mars, because of his eccentric orbit, doesn't always station. He doesn't always station on the trine. Sometimes he will, but sometimes he'll station closer to the square. And because he doesn't fit this pattern, pattern was very important throughout most of human history, because if it followed a pattern, if it followed number, what we could then infer from that was that it was closer to divinity, closer to Godhood, closer to order, closer to heavenly will. Now, the issue that we have with Mars is that he stations quite erratically. And so then we begin to build into our interpretation of Mars a rashness, a tendency towards quickness, towards speeds, towards erraticism, and unpredictability that comes with Mars. And that really is based on what he does visually. There's no other reason for that, except for, of course, what we see from our own experience. Another really great example of astrological symbolism is combustion. I speak about combustion a great deal. This is when a planet gets too close to the sun. And of course, the sun is the star that shines alone. When the sun's out, everybody else goes away. And this is why we all know a Leo, because Leo stands alone. Me. And this is the thing with the sun, is that when a planet gets too close to the sun, it surrenders its light back to the sun. Now, light, throughout most of our history, has been associated with goodness, with health, vitality, with power. And so for a planet to shine light back to us was an omen of either goodwill or strength or vitality or power. So for it to have surrendered its light was kind of indicative of that planet moving into the underworld in a way. And so it became associated with illness and death and rebirth and transformation. Before we had Pluto, combustion was the original symbol for transformation, because planets were beginning new phases. We talk about this a lot with the moon. A moon-sun conjunction is a new moon. And then it becomes, we've got maiden, mother, crone as the moon moves through her waxing and then full and then waning. And then she's an old moon, comes back, and then she's reborn as a new moon. Every planet goes through this. And so we have this ability to actually take a look at the planets and say, you have a young Jupiter in your chart. This would incline towards somebody who might be somebody who's quite naive or optimistic, very trusting, very merciful, very kind, because a naive Jupiter, hasn't lived enough life to realize that your trust can be taken advantage of. You can be burned. These are things that takes a lifetime for somebody to learn, for somebody to understand, and the planets go through lifetimes on their own. So there's so many different ways. We can talk about the houses, the signs, the planets, aspects. The symbolism is everywhere, and it's really, quite something to get to study that.
So then that symbolism combines with physical symbolism, because the first story you told about the keys,
yes.
And that's then taking symbolism out of what the keys represented for
yes.
that in his work.
Yeah, and so for instance, if you had, if you were going to take something a little bit more physical, so let's get back to an example of a missing key, for instance. If you found that the significator of a missing key was Mercury, and Mercury was so close to the sun that it was combust, what that would signify is that it's hidden, it's in a dark place, it's not somewhere easily accessible, it's not somewhere that you can see it, and it's possible that it's close to a source of light or heat. So I think, there's so many ways that we take this symbol, but what horary does really spectacularly well is forces you to come up with the most mundane interpretation on that symbol, and to really just dive right in to what are all the different levels of manifestation a symbol can have. And it's remarkable, I think, just how obvious things can be. Mars in Cancer, for instance, that's Mars is exalted in Capricorn. It's an energy that Capricorn likes. I quite like Mars in Capricorn. Because Mars, I mean, he just wants to take a sword out and take 10 heads off at once, and just say, job done then. But, in Capricorn, he knows when there's power to sheathe the sword and when to pull it out. There's a reservation with Capricorn that really suits Mars. Now, in Cancer, the opposite sign, we go from exaltation to a sign of fall. Okay, now the sign of fall is an unnatural state of decline, or something that has moved below its station in a way that feels very unnatural and unusual. Now, you interpret that in a natal chart, there's a million different ways to do that. But in a horary chart for a missing object, if you've got Mars and Capricorn exalted, that missing key is somewhere high up. If it's in fall, it's fallen. It's become lost because it fell. It's so literal in the interpretation that sometimes we miss the most obvious things because we're trying to be too clever. We're trying to overthink it. Yeah.
And that's the thing about astrology that blows me away over and over and over again, is how literal it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, I think I said this last week, I don't know, because something else came up there, is the same thing, where it's not symbolic or metaphorical, or it's literal, the translation.
It's real life, because what astrology is, it's measuring natural cycles. It's stages of increase and decrease. It's such a seasonal thing. We talk about, the introduction of moisture in spring, and then the heat in the summer, and then the moisture recedes in fall, and then we have an influx of cold in winter. That's the entire key of astrology, is understanding these kind of cycles. And you're so right that even a symbol will operate as a symbol, but have such obvious physical manifestations. I mean, I was just on the way to this conference, so I'm on the eve of the Astrological Association's 50th annual conference, just outside of London. That's where I am right now. It's midnight where I am. If it looks dark here, it's because it is. And I was driving in with somebody who was talking about her daughter. Now, her daughter's got Moon in Capricorn and square to Saturn. And this is, the kind of gal who, when she was young and she did something in trouble, or she did something to get herself in trouble, mother never needed to find out about it. This young girl would walk up to mom and say, I think I'll go sit on the naughty chair, mother. And I had no idea why. Why are you doing this? What have you done? But she dictated her own punishment. So Moon Saturn,
So hilarious. My daughter actually has Moon square Saturn as well, and she's exactly like she cannot hold it.
Oh, they take responsibility for themselves. They're too hard on themselves. And they feel so beholden to the mother. And it's fascinating. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so great. So, is there anything that horary astrology cannot answer? Is there like a realm where it's like, nah, we can't go there?
Well, I don't think there's any question. If there was a real need or concern to understand something, there's nothing that can't be put to horary. The only thing horary needs is a genuine question, honest intent, and something that can be answerable. So what that means is it rules out things like, there's no reason for, he said he was going to call me at 3:00. It's 3:01. When will he ring me? That is a great example of a question you should not put to horary, because there's no real impetus. There's no need. There's just impatience. You're just being impatient.
You mean, so if you came to it with that kind of question, it wouldn't work? Or?
Well, what you have is a flippant question, and you're going to have flippant symbolism. Because what we have to remember is the symbolism of the heavens. When a question is really pressing and it's very stressful, I think on a common sense level, what we know is that there's something happening in the birth chart that's really pushing something to a level of an extreme. But before we have that, then the astrology is going to be kind of just as lax, lazy, and flippant as the question. So I think it's not that there's nothing you couldn't ask, but it's about recognizing, why do you need to know this information? Have you actually exhausted the common sense alternatives? Have you done the work yourself? And what do you expect to learn? Is it verifiable? Is this something that you're actually going to be able to walk out with good information on? So, but I think mostly with horary, it's going to be a personal decision for the astrologer about what questions they're willing to take and what they're not willing to take. I'm happy to ask, will I get pregnant this year? I'll take that question happily. Not only will I tell you, if I think that you're due to be pregnant this year, but what might be standing in the way if it's a no, or what might move you in the positive direction. But I'll never take, will I ever be pregnant? I'll never take that. Because if I was to open up a chart and see that an individual, there were signs of barrenness everywhere, and that this individual having children, parenthood was not part of their path, I'm not prepared, to sit somebody down through the counseling that would take to kind of reveal all of that, and so it's about personal boundaries, I think, more than anything else. Just like tarot, I think, just like I Ching, and the recognition that this is a one-to-one connection about you and your client, and the emotional connection that you drive, the psychic connection that you share is everything. And if you can't be equally committed, they will be committed to the question, you are committed to the response. If you are not equally committed, that is where the problem comes in. And so it's not about so much that there's questions that could never be answered by horary, because even the weirdest questions, I imagine it could be, so long as there's a real need to know, and it really would make a difference in this person's day-to-day life, or even at this moment in time.
Wow. Wait, can you repeat the 3 things that the question needs to have?
We need honest intention, okay? We need something that is soul moving. It's got to be something of importance, and it needs to be answerable. So a question like, was Jesus a real person? Great example of like, why? Surely, that is, I've heard this rumor about the founding of Rome, and there's nobody who can confirm it anymore. And I would love to see if horary could. Yeah, that is a great example of like, you're asking a question out of idle curiosity. It's not going to drive you one way or the other. Now, if you want to have a conversation about, I've been a Christian for so many years, or I've been, whatever, and I just want to understand my relationship to my faith, perfect. That is a horary question. That is a beautiful horary question. Or if we want to say, I'm doing this research project and I'm worried that I'm relying too much on secondhand accounts or things that are theoretically rumors. Is that the case? Horary can answer that. But when we're talking about something, because there's a personal connection. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And that's what really is important there. Yeah.
So could you ask questions for another person as long as you were genuinely...
Well, that's a sticky thing too. Those are what we call third person horaries. And I think we have to, any client who comes to me with a third person horary, I am going to ask a lot more questions about why they think they need to know the answer, because very often what people are doing, they're peeking over somebody else's fence to understand what's happening in their life. If you're not in the situation, if you're not somehow connected to the outcome, if you have no investment in the outcome, then you're just asking out of curiosity. But there are examples and there are situations in which it would be appropriate for you to ask a question in which you have no personal involvement. I've got, somebody who's just emailed me last week. Her daughter's been going to school in St. Andrews up in Scotland, and a boy's gone missing. Now, I had just done a missing persons webinar and using astrology to understand the whereabouts and condition of missing persons and pets. And she'd gotten the recording of that. And her daughter was going to school in St. Andrews in Scotland, and the boy had gone missing, who had gone to, I don't know if he'd gone to school with her, but he was of university age. He'd gone out with a bunch of friends, and he had gone missing. And then some weeks later, we'd not heard from him. His body was washed up from the ocean. Yeah, it's a hard thing. Now, she'd asked her horary about it to understand what was going on, but in her mind, she wanted to understand the state of the community at that time so she could be of service to her daughter, so she could understand what was going on with the mentality of that area, so she could connect. That, to me, is a great example of a third-person horary that has a valid reason for existing, you know. But it's very different from you wake up and another Malaysian plane has gone missing and I just want to be the one astrologer to solve where it is. You know, that's very different. And so I think it's important to ask yourself, why do I think I need this information? And what is this actually going to do for me? How is this going to move me forward? You know, that client that person I was telling you about who had asked that question about the missing boy, she had actual actions she was intending to take as a result of what she learned, even if it's just to be a compassionate figure for her daughter or for the school, for the university she was in. She was in a position to be able to provide some compassion, understanding the state of what's going on there. Very different, you know, when you've got, you know, a tragedy that announces over Facebook, you see it, and then, you know, naturally all astrologers rush forward to try and, you know, interpret what must have happened at that moment. Usually those are the situations where it gets a little bit fuzzy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that there's like built-in protection mechanism to this approach. It's brilliant. And it sounds like the astrologer practicing this, it's like that saying, with great power comes great responsibility.
Massive responsibility. You know, you can learn a little bit and you could know, just most people, I think, who study horary learn just enough to be dangerous with it, because they don't commit to it, and they don't commit to the soul work. You know, they don't commit to the soul work that's it's incumbent upon the astrologer to be working on themselves and to be deepening their own knowledge, not only of the symbolism, but of who they are and what their own motivations are, and why are they working in this field and what are they attempting to do. It's really important that we continue to be, you know, as best we can, clear vessels, so that when, you know, water comes in, clean water comes out. You know, we don't have to worry about getting mixed up in our own situation here. So yeah, I think there is definitely a protective element going in there, but it's so much responsibility falls back on the astrologer, him or herself, to take accountability for the questions that they take, but also for the guidance that they provide. And that is a huge part that I think we don't spend enough time teaching horary students to really vet your questions and take accountability for everything you do and do not say in a consultation.
Wow. Well, it is very reassuring to me to know that you are out there practicing and teaching how to do that, because it's very clear that you are walking the walk and talking the talk at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Okay, so for someone that is wanting to go on this path, who's been intrigued by what you've said today, or maybe has been dabbling or hearing about it, where do they?
It's a great question. I think that there's so much to read. There's so much to learn out there. There's so many books. I mean, horary is one of those techniques that you're not going to stumble on it. You do have to search a bit. And so I do think there's a few things that I would suggest. The first is to read any book on divination and, you know, any kind of prophetical work, because what you do need to orient yourself toward is understanding what is divination meant to do, and what are the ethical boundaries of any kind of divination practice. And that is not a horary specific thing. I think that is relevant in tarot, in I Ching, numerology, you know, geomancy. It doesn't really much matter. You should deepen your knowledge into what have diviners who have come before me set as kind of a rubric or a standard for how we should behave. Behave or operate in a consultation setting. So that's thing number one, okay? I think it will also be very important for you to find a teacher, because this is one of those, you know, the apprenticeship model really services itself well in any astrological field, but definitely in horary, where the guidance of somebody else's expertise can really move mountains for you and push you in the right direction. Of course, there's going to be certain books that will be indispensable. I do see that Jeff Peters, hi Jeff, has made the comment of William Lilly and Christian astrology being such an important work. That is central. I teach Lily's technique. We do modify a bit with what we now know from what Venati's had to say, Abu Mashar, mashallah, Saul. You know, we go as far back as we need to really understand the root of the symbol's origin and to be able to communicate that. But Christian astrology is great because it was the first and probably last really great text on horary that was written in English. And so it has just tremendous strength and power to it, but it's in 17th century English. And so you really have to be okay to, it takes a bit of work to do. So, and this is again why I think mentorship and learning, with the School of Traditional Astrology, we teach an online horary certification program, 20 sessions, either over 20 weeks or 10 weeks. But this is a mentorship program too. I mean, we're not just throwing you to the wolves. We're not just giving you material and say, learn on your own. We're actually having regular discussions, conversations, teaching, guiding, pulling, stretching, arguing, like we got to wrestle this chart to the ground and figure out that is the energy you want with the teacher. And if you don't have that with your teacher, you need to find somebody who gives that energy to you, because you need that back and forth and that exchange. And the final thing is, I think once you start to get to a place where you understand the basics and you really want to start putting this into work, what's really important, as I've said before, is that we need to vet our questions, that we're not just taking any question that comes to us because we need practice. Because when you need practice, you're willing to take anything, no matter how trivial, how unimportant, how mindless, and just silly the question might be, you might be tempted to take it because it's there. My advice would be to buy books, that have been published in the last 100 years by other horary astrologers, and use the case studies that they provide as like kind of a workbook. They will always provide you with the chart, with the question, with the situation, and then just don't read the answer. Just don't read it. Work through the chart. See if you can get to the same conclusion that astrologer got to. Don't make too big of an assumption. Keep it focused. Keep it sharp. Because every symbol has 72 meanings, and it's really important that you don't lose yourself down a rabbit hole. Make really observable, clean comments. Try to say it in 1 or 2 paragraphs, maybe less than 300 words. What would you have said to that client looking at that chart? Compare what you said, then back to what the author said was the outcome, and learn and adapt yourself through this. And again, I think this is where teaching and mentorship comes up, because if you can't understand why I said this and it feels like it should have went this way, why did it go this way? That's why people like, Deborah exists. Why, I've kind of been working in the teaching world now too, and educating, because you do need somebody who's been an experienced practitioner, but also somebody who has done the work to study and to understand the history of this technique. To put you on the right path and guide you. And it really, I think having the right teacher and the right mentor takes your learning curve from, a decade down to a few short years if you give it real, true commitment and study. So that was what I would suggest and what I would advise. And just to remember that at the end of the day, the most important thing you can do as a horary astrologer when questions come to you is make sure that they are questions worth answering before you jump into it.
Wade, you are so impressive. You are so passionate and eloquent, and obviously, like, you have studied this, and you're so on your path, and that's so clear, and it's just really refreshing and really nice to be around. So I am so
I don't know if it's you or the wine, but I'm blushing now.
Well, I'm so glad that you came up and introduced yourself to me at UAC. You guys, this was the last night. I was on my way to bed, and I was like walking through the room where everybody was hanging out and talking, and I was on my way to go to sleep. And I was talking to one group, like a group of people, and this guy comes up and he gives me his card and he goes, I just want to give this to you so that when I reach out to you after this conference, I can say that I met you at UAC and we can start the conversation there. I was like, great, awesome. But then the best thing is Wade walks away, and the people I'm with, including Jen Zart, are like, you need to have him on Astrology Hub. You need to talk. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, good. So I'm really glad that you introduced yourself. I'm really glad that, we met. And
oh, you're so sweet. I'm also very grateful. Thank you. It was very nice to get to meet you. I mean, I've been, kind of watching for some, like I said in the beginning, I'm like, this girl, I don't know what she's doing, but she's just moving mountains like it's nothing. And the rest of us are trying to figure out, how do we do this with the same seemingly small amount of effort? You have a gift for this. It's just so fantastic.
Well, I think it's brilliant too. Is it safe to say that you're one of the people responsible for a renaissance with horary astrology?
Well, I think that a lot of that came before me, but I'm continuing it. you know,
Nice.
and I'm continuing to move it forward. And I think that there are certain conversations that have not been had in horary that I am very interested in bringing up. And so in that sense, in the terms of, you know, getting back to what horary really is, not horary as we understood it 10 years ago. So
Wow.
I think that's where I'm putting my energy now.
It's so funny as a business owner and, you know, someone who's working with a lot of people out there that are interested in astrology. Part of me is like, can we rebrand Horary Astrology?
Yeah.
Because it's so,
Yeah.
it feels so like inaccessible, but the
It
way
feels so dry and mechanical
right,
and
it sounds boring.
soulless, doesn't
It
it?
sounds like,
And that if you read an article, if you read a book, or if you're in a conversation with somebody and they're telling you it's a yes, no thing, or it's predictive, it's fated, or you get this sense in your heart that this feels cold, soulless, mechanic, you need to run because that person doesn't get it. They don't get it. You
right.
know,
Well,
it's so much deeper.
the way that you described it today, and I mean, it just brought on so much dimension. And that's the thing that's so amazing about astrology is there's like so many layers of this onion that we can just keep peeling back. It boggles my mind. It's like it is never ending. But as I've said before, we're like studying an ever expanding universe. So
We really are. We really are.
Ever expanding practice and conversation and all of it. So
Yeah.
Wade, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. It's like what, almost 1 o'clock at night. And
Oh yeah, well, I think it's wine o'clock really.
it's 1 o'clock. That's fantastic. I'll invite more of our guests to show up with their wine glass.
Yeah, I think it's the way to go.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure you take advantage of the free gift that we have for you. The Cancer lunar cycle is coming up. The retrogrades are all going to be happening at once. There's going to be some helpful tips in there for you in terms of dates and timing and things that you can actually do to work with the energy. So check it out. The link is in the chat and also in the description of the video. Wade, I can't wait to have you back. Seems like there's going to be a million, like we just barely touched the
so much to uncover there. Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for tuning in and for making astrology a part of your life. We'll see you next week.